Mad Max is thus far the best in video game interpretation of the hugely popular film series that began over 40 years ago. Released in September of 2015, it was massively overshadowed by the same day release of Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Developed by Avalanche Studios and published by Warner Bros. Interactive, Mad Max features a near future Earth left desolate by human civilization and a brutal journey of survival and the futility of hope in a world gone mad. I remember seeing the trailers for Mad Max back in 2015, around the same time as the May release of the excellent Mad Max Fury Road, but being a college student on a rather tight budget, I chose to invest my time and money in Metal Gear instead. I remember some of the reviews of the game at the time, most of which said that Mad Max was a perfectly serviceable game, but one that was ultimately forgettable and worth skipping. Because of those initial reviews, when I finally bought Mad Max late in 2020, I only did so due to a sale. After 50 hours in the Australian wasteland, I believe those reviewers were wrong. This video is an attempt to explain why. If you've played and or completed Mad Max, please leave a comment and let me know what you thought of the game, especially if there's something here I missed. If you haven't played Mad Max yet and are thinking of picking it up, feel free to ask me anything down below in the comments or let me know if this was helpful in aiding your decision to do so. Finally, if you want to see more reviews and other game videos from me in the future, please check out some of my other videos and, of course, subscribe. In 2021, we live in what could generously be called uncertain times. A pandemic writhes throughout our world, partly spread by greed and hubris, and partly by plain old human stupidity. Violence and war are more profitable than ever, as many nations use their personal aggressors to pressure their perceived adversaries into submission, oftentimes even within their own borders. Fossil fuels, plastics, and other invasive pollutants are dumped within our soils, our seas, and our souls, causing the extinction of species and degradation of our world's ecosystems at unprecedented rates. In addition, the future of the world's peoples depends on a series of interconnected economies that prioritize maximizing wealth for an already unconscionably wealthy few. For many of us, the leaders of our nations are foolish, impotent, and even tyrannical, preferring to do what is currently popular or personally preferred rather than what is, in the long term, most just and most helpful, both for our planet and the multitudes of species we share it with. In an undated near future, we find ourselves in the non-canon boots of Max Rokitansky, in a world our species may one day see if nothing averts us from our current path. Mad Max is, like the series that has inspired it, a journey that is not just about a man torn apart by his losses, but it's also a story about humanity as it dies. Mad Max is an exploration of the desperation, the fury, and the madness of people in a world in which hope is dead and glory is lost. You enter as Max enters the Great White on his way to the mythical plains of Silence, where he is ambushed by war boys and struck down by the warlord of the region. Stripped of his iconic jacket and robbed of his interceptor, the Black on Black, Max is left to die of exposure. From here, you take over to guide Max throughout the wasteland to build up a new car, the Magnum Opus, helping some and hurting more in Wasteland Australia along the way. I'm not really going to talk about the story beyond that. The story is fine, and there are some great callbacks to the films, and if you're a fan, I'd rather you find those for yourself. Also, there are characters here, but unlike Fury Road, the focus here is much less on an ensemble cast and contemporary thematic elements, and much more on you, the individual driving Max on. This is a very gameplay-driven game, and not so much a narrative one. There are what I feel some missteps with the story. Most notably, there's a romantic subplot that didn't do much for me personally, but in the context of the Mad Max series overall, I think it's an appropriate inclusion when considering Max's traumatic past. There are also some themes of being altruistic versus predatory, and of kindness versus ruthlessness, but those choices are presented here in a very binary hurt them and take it, or don't hurt them and don't kind of way. It's not very deep, and in the short or long term, those choices don't really matter beyond the emphasis that you place on them. Again, the story is fine, but it's not Tarantino or Hennig, but it's there, and it is serviceable. While unspecified in-game, Mad Max takes place in what we can assume is a coastal region of Australia. Upon entering this region, you'll take your new dog along as you meet a hunchback named Chumbucket, a mechanist zealot who sees you as his prophesied angel and will accompany you throughout your journey into the wasteland. It's divided into 4 main regions. You'll start off in the Great White, a mostly empty desert of small plateaus, jagged quarries, and endless stretches of sun-bleached sand. The color palette here is mostly toward gray and white, with some browns mixed in for variety. A dilapidated stronghold, a walled-in lighthouse, hosts leader Cheat, a scarred survivor suffering from chronic pain and an enthusiasm for black powder with which to defend his holding. From here, you'll eventually find your way to the Parched Moon, where you'll see what remains of the long, dry seafloor and the windswept deserts of the Great Nothing beyond. Here, the desiccated husks of white, petrified coral serve as reminders of what was, alongside hazard yellow pools of sulfuric acid and jagged gray and black obelisks of formerly underwater mountains, at least one of which is volcanic. The leader here is Gutgash, an old man who remembers the seas, and who rallies his people within an old tanker for shelter from the desert and security from the roving bands of blood-mongering savages just outside its hull. After, you'll travel to the region of the Dead Barrens, the formerly most populated and most well-developed region, where you'll see long-starving grocery stores, hollow petrol stations, deserted apartment buildings, and more. Here, the land is red, much like the bloody American West, and mesas interrupt crisscrossing highways and bridges, the last lanes of humanity's former self. Pink Eye, the self-styled mother of the few decent folk who remain here, leads her charges from the shell of a nuclear cooling tower with a fierce determination to lead her people away from the hopeless wasteland you found yourself in. Eventually, you'll make your way to Fury Road's mentioned but unvisited Gastown and its surrounding dumps, a metropolis of rusted trash and metal refuse surrounded by pools of black crude that feed the town's appetite for fuel, fire, and warfare. Here, the cult of the Great Flame is led by the Great Freya, a charred and blistered fanatic who believes that the best and purest way to the hereafter is via live incineration. A final detour will take you to the dunes, a newly desertified and mostly empty tract of golden sands that hides treasures of the old world underneath its naked highways in what will surely be every speed demon's region of choice. Considering this title was released over half a decade ago, Mad Max's art style, aesthetic, and graphical presentation remain impressive and fairly ageless. The vehicles are well detailed, character models feature interesting clothing styles thrown together by necessity, scarcity, and eccentricity, and this wasteland itself is at every turn gorgeous to behold. After some time in the wasteland, no matter where you are in the world, landmarks often serve to orient you in the right direction. In most places in the wasteland, for example, you can see the billowing black clouds of Gastown, an ominous beacon of ragged inevitability on your journey. Special mention deserves to be given the sky as well, since the vast majority of the game will feature at least a third of it taking up your screen. It's very often simply beautiful and serves as an appropriately heavenly vista that abruptly gives way to the hell on earth you find yourself on. Finally, Max's shotgun sounds like a life-shattering cannon. And the vehicles he finds and steals throughout the wasteland sound like the petrol-guzzling, metal carapace behemoths that they are. Collisions and explosions are loud, dramatic, and impressive. Whereas melee combat features brutal strikes that convincingly convey the force of meat being pulverized. Or bones being snapped with the decisiveness of a final blow. All in all, the sensory experience provided by Mad Max are every bit as impactful as the films that inspired it. As far as Mad Max's gameplay, this is the heart of the title, and while it didn't innovate nearly as much as Kojima's The Phantom Pain, it is an admirably well-crafted and fun set of mechanics that combine to create a highly enjoyable gameplay loop within the open world. There are two main components to Mad Max's gameplay, in-vehicle and on foot. In the magnum opus, at least at first, Max is rather vulnerable. With the most basic protection and practically no utility beyond the base transportation it provides, the Opus is little more than a swift target. Over time, however, both the Opus itself and Chum Bucket receive substantial and meaningful upgrades that provide for gameplay possibilities not possible in any other title to date of any franchise. While the Opus can receive additions such as the series mainstay of the V8 engine, armor shredding wheels, the ability to shoot jets of flame to the sides of the vehicle, and others, the real standout here is the Thunderpoon. A harpoon turned missile launcher, Chum Bucket will stand in the back of the Opus and fire on enemy vehicles, pull down scarecrows, tear apart vehicles, and even target individual people. In my opinion, this is by far the most unique, most satisfying, and most fun feature in the game.
Do it. The only thing you know how. Kill him.
It will tear that tire right off!
Take his life like he took ours.
Driving up and reducing soft targets to bloody bits is grimly satisfying.
Those things. Insane vessels. I've seen them before. Huge spikes with tiny small wheels on them.
And almost every time I had the opportunity to do so, I'd fling at least one of my foes into the air via harpoon through their chest cavity. In the late game, one of my favorite tactics was to simply pull up near an occupied site and simply roast alive any attacking foes with my side burners.
What do you want?
The options aren't endless, but damn are they satisfying. While people are usually easy targets for the Opus, other vehicles can offer a significant challenge, especially if you skimp out on progression and upgrades. Having said that, while there are a great many incremental upgrades, at the highest level of progression, enemy vehicles and even armored convoys become easy pickings for the supercar that you can build up over time. These upgrades are acquired via Scrap, a wasteland pickup that has no other function beyond being a gameplay mechanic that spaces out upgrades between finished activities. In addition, the Opus isn't the only vehicle at your disposal. If you choose, you can hijack vehicles and bring them back to a stronghold, storing them in a catalog of sorts for your own use. If you plan on getting the game and collecting these, make sure you do so as the game progresses. See, as you clear the map, those vehicles basically disappear from the world over time, making them much more difficult to find and capture.
I'll bring it forward to the altar of this lowly acolyte. There she is. Continue to remain awake. The big chief!
Don't get too excited. We need to get the hell out of here.
Oh, yes. It's Scrotus, the immortal. He ransacks the Pueblo. Yeah, but he thinks he's going to dismantle you piece by piece. I will wed the big chief to the angel in a ram, and then we'll see.
You can also take Chum Bucket's buggy throughout the wasteland with your dog in tow. No, sorry, you can't pet him. You can also choose different configurations of the Magnum Opus, dubbed Archangels, and take them out in the wasteland depending on your preferred vehicle build, aesthetic, and playstyle. Just as the Opus provides for an at first vulnerable and later formidable experience, so too does Max himself. Just like the Opus, on foot, Max can be upgraded as well, with new brawling techniques such as blocks, melee reversals, instant executions via shivs, and savage environmental finishing moves that can almost always kill your target. His leather jacket and a ballistic vest can also be upgraded, as well as ammo capacity for his iconic sawn-off shotgun. Also, armor for his wrists are used for better blocking, and creative but disturbing gauntlets made of automotive parts such as wing nuts, bolts, and steel plating can be created to better murder your foes with. Finally, you can also change Max's look. You can grow out his beard or give him a bandana, stuff like that. A lot of his appearances from the films are options here. This combat system feels very reminiscent of that of the Batman Arkham games, but less mobile and instead much more grounded and much more visceral. While Batman would often hit foes in the face and drop them, when Max hits someone for the final time, it's clear that his intention is to straight up murder his enemies, whether by a simple strike or a combo-ending move such as an MMA-style neck-breaking slam, or a Spartan-style kick that seemingly breaks the sternum of the unlucky foe on the receiving end of it. The three factions you'll fight against are the War Boys, the Buzzards, and Roadkill, the last of which is new and original to the game. The War Boys are the area's religious fanatics, the Buzzards are more reclusive opportunists, and Roadkill are the Wasteland's more generic marauders. All three of them can be found interspersed in all three regions, and all three feature enemy types that are almost functionally identical to one another on foot. In general, there are standard fighters, dagger-wielding foes that rush you, heavies with shields that you'll have to get around or destroy, and even a few one-time bosses scattered throughout the world. The factions do have differing vehicles, though, that are heavily inspired by the films, my personal favorite of which were Buzzards' spiked war cars. The shotgun is sometimes used, but not super often because ammo is kind of scarce for it. Instead, there are often cans of petrol that litter camps. You can use these as bombs you can throw, but you can also take them back to your car, as the Opus does require fuel, especially for the side burners. There are also thunder sticks, those bomb tick sticks in Fury Road, that you can either throw or impale your target with and push them back, with predictably explosive results. As far as health, the harsh realities of survival in this world are conveyed via food and water. As you can probably imagine, there are no Macas or Hungry Jacks here. Instead, you'll either eat Dinky D's dog food from a can or maggots from the corpses of rotting humans. The very first time I did this, it was not an accident. I thought it was loot, and I felt terrible for making Max eat those, but in hindsight, I really don't think he gives a shit. Survival at all costs is the central motivator for everything that Max does in this title. As far as water, you'll find sources of this at camps via filters that draw water out of the air. These basically serve as an extra health bar for Max. If you're severely injured, you can finish off your canteen and go find more. Having this topped off is always a good idea, especially if you're somewhere in over your head. To continue on the topic of upgrades, here's the part of the review where I tell you the maybe not so great part of how you do all of this. You have to grind your ass off. In some ways, I feel like Avalanche Studios went to the Ubisoft school of game design, because repetition and checklist location design is the heart of the game here. Essentially, the loop is this. You look at your map, you decide on a location. It could be a scavenging point, an enemy camp, point of interest, whatever. You go there, you kill all of the enemies present, and then you finish whatever checklist is at that particular location. Some are required, most are optional, but those optional objectives are going to provide you with the resources that you'll need in order to fully upgrade the Opus, provide upgrades for Max, and to unlock story progression from the main stronghold leaders. So they are important if you want to reach your full potential. So I did all of these. All of them. There's, I think, 200 plus pickups spread across the entire map. And I'll be honest, that sounds like a lot. It sounds stupid. But here's the thing. This very much grindy aspect of the game is also where it secretly shines. The environments here are so well designed that every single one of them are interesting. The camps and settlements are designed not so much like video game levels, but like actual human beings had a part in making them. Which, yeah, okay, they did, but still. Almost every place you're going to visit has some aspect of environmental storytelling, a relic to pick up that tells a bit about the world before, during the collapse, or it just features world building and that it was built by the people here for them to live, capture, torture, whatever they do in that space. It's just really, really great design from both a world building and an exploratory perspective. The thing about these environments I didn't like is that, much like the Raider camps in the Fallout series, there are mutilated corpses everywhere. This doesn't make sense to me, and it really stands out as an unnecessary addition included simply for shock value. But it did the opposite, in that over time I became desensitized to it, and never mind, because that's kind of the point, isn't it? Okay, in some places it is appropriate to the environment, I'll give you that. But in every other encampment, that's just too much. It's gratuitous at that point. One of the last features I want to point out is one of the world's most unique and surprising, and that's the massive sandstorms that periodically ravage this Australian wasteland. Just as depicted in Fury Road, these awe-inspiring elemental behemoths roll in like a ravenous plague, for a time devouring everything in its path, including you. While these usually only last a few minutes at a time, they feature a genuinely rewarding decision that rewards you for taking a risk and navigating it successfully should you choose to do so. Like you might in real life, you can simply park somewhere where the wind is blocked or find shelter and wait for the storm to pass. On the other hand, if you decide to brave the storm, you can drive around with the risk of damaging your vehicle via the detritus and scrap the storm throws at you. If you're caught out on foot, the storm will damage you with these same projectiles, and depending on your armor and health, can damage you to the point where you're killed and have to restart nearby. However, there's a rather large reward waiting for you out in that chaos. Also tossed around by the storm are large wooden boxes that you can harpoon, hold down, and break open for your reward, a substantial amount of scrap that healthily exceeds that of what's usually available to you. Having such an iconic event from the film be interesting and rewarding is one of the best examples of form meeting function in this title. There are also environments that you'll visit that feature a really authentic sense of ambiance and foreboding, and you'll beat the shit out of whatever's there because you're Mad Max, and it's just so enjoyable that every space is worth exploring just to see what Avalanche has created in these places. The Underdunes in particular was one of my favorite places to visit and explore, and it's a welcome change of pace from a lot of the Wasteland's more fast-paced, more wide-open areas. My biggest critique of the three regions and their overall design is one I'm almost positive I'm going to carry into future titles, and that's the fact that while the art direction is distinct from one region to another, the gameplay really isn't. What I mean by this is that there really aren't new scenarios or styles of gameplay built into the regions themselves. Every region plays more or less the same. Again, this is a world by checklist, not world by inhabitants or world by history. In general, once you full clear that first region, you should by then have a pretty good idea of what this whole world has to offer. What I would like to have seen is one region focused on melee combat, another on car combat, another on evasion and survival, and so on. That obviously didn't happen. Despite this, I maintain that even with the grind, Mad Max's core gameplay is so damn fun, I mostly don't care. Okay, so what does more than 50 hours of what I found highly enjoyable gameplay cost? $20 US or euros. That's it. That's on Steam, that's on the PlayStation Network. I think that's also the case on the Xbox Network. You get a solid open world action game with a great gameplay and no noticeable performance issues for only $20. If you do like I did and wait for a sale, you can steal it for $5. There's no extra DLC and there are no microtransactions within the title, which means you buy it once and everything the title has to offer is yours. In case you didn't notice by this point in the review, I loved this game and my time with it. I can't say enough good things about Mad Max, and I highly recommend you pick this up. The only drawbacks are that the story isn't particularly deep, the characters are your typical wasteland white trash, and the gameplay loop can be really repetitive at times. Despite these small issues, in my opinion, again, those reviewers were wrong. This is a fantastic title that is well worth your time, and in my opinion, at this price, Mad Max is unmissable. If you're a fan of Mad Max, please like the video and leave a comment before letting me know what you thought of the game, especially if there's something here I missed. If you haven't played Mad Max yet, I really hope that this helped convince you to do so, and I hope that you have a great time with it like I did. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. If you're subscribed, I'll see you next time. Thank you.